Welcome to one of your first of several Campus Life meetings. My name is Mike Hayes, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Student Life at the University of Chicago, and I'd like to add my welcome to the University of Chicago. As you probably noticed, you are in the competition gymnasium of the Ratner Athletic Center, where our UChicago Maroons compete in intercollegiate athletics. I know that your fellow students who are athletes would enjoy your support. And before we get started, I'd ask that each of you silence your cell phones. Thank you. We have a very robust program this morning discussing one of Chicago's foundational values, free expression. Joining me on stage today are 4 members of our community who assist the university every single day in stewarding this important value. With me are Michelle Rasmussen, Dean of Students in the university, Melissa Gilliam, Vice Provost for Academic Leadership, Advancement, and Diversity, Ted Stamatakos, Senior Associate General Counsel, and Randall Picker, James Parker, Distinguished Senior Professor of Law. We'll hear from these individuals throughout the program. Let's give them a round of applause. To set the tone for our conversation this morning, I'd like to introduce Daniel Diermeyer, Provost of the University of Chicago, who will offer greetings and his thoughts on this important topic. As Provost, he has responsibility for the academic and research programs across the university, as well as the oversight of the university's budget. Prior to his appointment, Provost Diermeyer was Dean of the Harris School of Public Policy from 2014 to 2016. He also holds the David Lee Schilling Law Distinguished Service Professorship at the Harris School and in the college. Provost Diermeyer's teaching and research focuses on formal political theory, political institutions, the interaction of business and politics, text analytics, public perception, as well as crisis and reputation management. Please welcome Provost Diermeyer to the stage.
Well, good morning to all of you, and welcome to the University of Chicago. We have a great panel today and a great program for you. And to set the tone, I want to just put this a little bit into perspective for why this is such an important topic for us. You chose to the University of Chicago to spend your next years with us for many reasons, but one of the important ones I think that you should at least consider is really what the University of Chicago is all about. It's a great university, we all know that, but it's a university that is quite distinct and has its own identity compared to many other great places of higher education. When you look at many other universities, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and so forth, they developed over time, kind of like countries develop. Britain develops first as that, then the Anglo-Saxons, and so forth. And the University of Chicago, in contrast to them, was founded on a set of principles. So to use my kind of country analogy, it's a little bit like the United States, that from the first moment on was founded on a set of principles, such as the Constitution and so forth. That's different from other universities. And then these principles have guided this university really from the first day. They continue to guide us. We constantly think about what they mean, how they apply in the current context, but they have been a wonderful set of principles that have guided the university over its 127 years of its existence. The first important component of that is that the university is totally focused on academic excellence. And what that means in the context of a college education, it means that our goal is to provide the best and most transformative education you're going to find anywhere. That means for us that we have an integrated college experience. You all know that. And that's what you're going to start on. And most importantly, it is designed and structured to really look at all possible modes and dimensions of inquiry. We have Nobel laureates in economics, many of you know that. We have them in physics, we have them in medicine, we have them in chemistry, but we also have had them in literature. We have the world's greatest astrophysicist on campus and the world's greatest living female composer. So we look at all sorts of different dimensions, and we do it in a particular way. We do it in a way that is focused and dedicated to the exchange of ideas. We believe that the best education and the deepest and most profound insights come from the fact that we challenge each other, that we argue with each other, that we discuss and debate. And if you are disagreeing with me, I should be grateful for that, because that means you're taking my ideas seriously and I have a chance to think about them more, question my assumptions, and end up with deeper insights than when I walked into this great university. So this is what we live by. This is the fundamental principle that guides everything that we do here. And that principle is founded on two very important values. The first value is the one we're going to talk about most today, which will be freedom of expression. And the idea here is that we want to make sure that everybody in the classroom, when you talk to each other in the residence halls, outside on the quads, feels freely and feels the freedom to express their ideas without any constraints, without being worried that they're going to be suppressed or that they're going to be censored in any way. We believe that this is an absolutely essential component for us to create the type of transformative education that you all came here to the University of Chicago. The second component is our commitment to diversity and inclusion. So what that means for us is that when we have this debate, we believe that deeper insights come if everybody participates and if we bring as many possible perspectives to the table, to the seminar rooms. Different backgrounds, different histories, different economic backgrounds, different family backgrounds. And we want you all to participate in this great debate, in this great discussion that makes this university so special. Sometimes this means that we're going to have to deal with points of views that are not our own, that are point of views that we may not agree with, that we may fundamentally disagree with. But what we're committed to is to the process of arguing with each other, of discussing it, of finding reasons, and exploring our assumptions and the assumptions of others to end up with insights that are more profound and can guide us throughout our lives. One of the things that we have learned is that engaging and committing to these values is not always easy. We come from different backgrounds, we come from different schools, we may have different family traditions, we may have different spiritual traditions, we may have different historic and economic contexts. So one of the important parts of this program and of coming to the University of Chicago is to realize that this is not easy for everybody, but that it is something that is of tremendous value and will guide you throughout your time here at the university. So, be ready that you're going to be challenged. Be ready that there's things that will question of how you have been thinking about these issues before, questioning our assumptions, questioning what we've done before, ending up with deeper insights is what this university is all about, and today is the first step you're going to take in this direction. Thank you very much, and welcome to the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Diermeyer. Thank you. We appreciate you being here this morning. So, to get us started, and to further help us start thinking about this important UChicago value, let's hear from a former UChicago professor of law and what he says about your next 4 years.
The purpose of college is not just, as I said before, to transmit skills. It's also to widen your horizons, to make you a better citizen, to help you to evaluate information, to help you make your way through the world, to help you be more creative. The way to do that is to create a space where a lot of ideas are presented and collide, and people are having arguments, and people are testing each other's theories, and over time, people learn from each other because they're getting out of their own narrow point of view and having a broader point of view. So Arnie, I'm sure, has the same experience that I did, which is when I went to college, suddenly there were some folks who didn't think at all like me. And if I had an opinion about something, they'd look at me and say, well, that's stupid. And then they'd describe how they saw the world. And they might have had a different sense of politics, or they might have a different view about poverty, or they might have a different perspective on race. And sometimes their views would be infuriating to me. But it was because there was this space where you could interact with people who didn't agree with you and had different backgrounds than you, that I then started testing my own assumptions. And sometimes I changed my mind. Sometimes I realized, you know what, maybe I've been too narrow-minded. Maybe I didn't take this into account. Maybe I should see this person's perspective. So that's what college, in part, is all about.
President Zimmer, whom you met yesterday, plays a national role as an expert and champion related to free expression. Under his leadership, the university has become a national model among higher education for safeguarding free speech and expression. Let's listen as he puts the value of free expression in historical context and explains the Chicago principles. These principles have been adopted by countless institutions across the country as their guideposts for free expression. We're going to turn to two of our panelists this morning, Randy and Melissa. President Zimmer talks of this relentless pursuit of the idea of free expression. Why is that important at the University of Chicago?
Well, I think it's really important to understand what we do at the university, and I think we do two things. We work really hard to discover new ideas, and we communicate those through scholarship and through what goes on in the classroom. That's the fundamental enterprise that we do at the university and that you're joining us here to do. That's really hard to do. I just can't impress upon you how hard that is. And to do that, we need the right tools to do that. And so this powerful sense that we have to chase ideas and do so in a fully unencumbered way, I think that's the core of what President Zimmer is talking about.
So in addition to my role as an administrator, I'm a faculty member, and I study a topic called reproductive justice. I work in the south side of Chicago, I work in India, and work in slums, and I work on issues of reproductive health, issues like HIV. I've watched across the country as my colleagues actually have their work scrutinized, and often it's very hard to do. The advantage and the opportunity we have at the University of Chicago is that we get to study what we want to study. We get to think what we want to think, and we get to express our views, whether you're a faculty member or a student or another member of this community. This is an incredibly rare opportunity, and we have to take it very seriously.
Thank you. We're going to move to our first student vignette. With current events playing out, Laverne Cox is invited by a student organization to campus to give a talk about the history of the transgender community and the historically marginalized place they occupy on a college campus. Let's listen.
Who's this Laverne Cox person?
What do you mean, who's this Laverne Cox person? Haven't you ever seen Orange is the New Black? She plays Sophia, the transgender hairdresser.
Oh, yeah. And what is she speaking about?
Well, from my understanding, she's coming to campus to talk about the history of transgender persons on college campuses and the discrimination that they face.
Oh, so it's one of those talks where UChicago invites someone liberal to talk about perceived problems on campus.
Oh, come on, it won't be that bad. I think we should go. It'll definitely be interesting to hear her point of view and see what she has to say.
I mean, yeah, but if she sucks, I'm blaming you.
I can deal with that.
We're live here at the University of Chicago, where Laverne Cox has just given her remarks on how the university should make drastic reforms to the way it handles transgender students and transgender issues. What are your thoughts on the speech?
Yeah, I think she actually made some really good points, and I think we really have to rethink things here at UChicago.
You know, I disagree. I don't think that while I do appreciate some of the sentiments she was sharing and her experience, I don't think her policy points were very convincing, and I think it's an incredibly emotionally charged topic to be talking about on campus.
So here we have the case of an invited speaker to campus, most likely by an RSO, a registered student organization. This program has been designated for the specific purpose of hearing perspectives of that invited guest, who also enjoys free expression rights. Michelle, how is it that speakers come to campus?
So speakers come to campus in myriad different ways. One of the great things about the University of Chicago is that on any given day, there is just an incredible array of speakers who come at the invitation of academic departments, of individual faculty members, of entities like the Institute of Politics, and by students. And we try very hard at the university to give students the resources, whether it be financial resources, space resources, or just advising resources to think about the kinds of folks they'd like to bring to discuss interesting ideas of the day, things that are relevant to their particular group, whatever their group might be interested in. And as a result, we have a real diverse range of speakers in any given year.
Okay. Let me ask you a follow-up. What are the options if students disagree with a speaker and or they want to express that somehow?
Again, there's myriad ways that you can express your displeasure or your disagreement with a speaker, and as long as you don't interfere with the rights of that group of students or faculty or that other entity to have that speaker come, those ways that you can express your displeasure are many. You might decide to hold an alternative event. You might decide to engage directly with the folks who are bringing that speaker to campus to get more insights into why they feel it's important to have that person come. You might even be part of a protest, and that's fine too.
Great. I'm going to ask Ted a two-part question. Given the high-profile events on college campuses this past year, and some of those headlines were on the screens as you were coming in, would the university ever disinvite a speaker? And I guess the second part of that question is, can anybody just simply show up and speak?
Well, the easy answer on disinvitation is no. The university itself, its leaders, its administrators, don't disinvite speakers. It's a corollary to the principle that Michelle mentioned. And disinvitation or withdrawing an invitation would be the prerogative of the group that has invited the speaker in the first instance. Being a lawyer, I'm trained to identify exceptions, and I'd say there is one little exception. I can't help myself, and that has to do with the safety and health of those participating in any particular event. We have a fundamental obligation and commitment to ensuring safety and health of participants in our programs, like students, of researchers, and of invitees, people who come to talk. And I could foresee under some circumstances a situation where the university works with the organization or the group that has invited a speaker to either find a venue that's more appropriate for the setting or reschedule in a way that allows us to plan appropriately. But ultimately, the disinvitation, the authority to disinvite, is not the university's to exercise.
Thanks. We're going to look at a quote on the board. Hannah Holborn Gray, who was the former president of the University of Chicago, said, "Education should not be intended to make people feel comfortable. It is meant to make them think." This is an important notion, and let's dig a little further with two additional videos that will help us make additional meaning of this. The first being from Jay Ellison, the Dean of Students in the college, and secondly from Professor Jeff Stone, whom President Zimmer mentioned in his remarks, the Edward Levy Distinguished Service Professor, and as President Zimmer told us, the chair and the author of the report of the Commission on Free Expression.
So I'm Jay Ellison. I'm the Dean of Students in the college. I want to welcome you to the university and to the college in particular. This is a wonderful opportunity for you and for us to have you here. As I've said in my letters of welcome and introduction, this is a place that we want you to ask questions. We want you to debate and argue. We want you to think about what we're saying, and we want to think about what you're saying. This is an opportunity not for us to teach you what to think, but how to think, how to be critical, how to analyze the information that comes to you. And as you do that, there'll be times that you will be uncomfortable. That's just part of the educational experience. But we want to be careful to distinguish, and I encourage you to distinguish between being uncomfortable and harm. They are different. When we talk and we think critically about things, we are really thinking about words and we're thinking about ideas. We're critically analyzing the things that come before us, but we're not intending harm. What we are doing is, at times, being very uncomfortable and pushing our comfort levels. But words are important, and words and how we think about them and how we analyze them are important. And that's very, very different. And this is an opportunity for you to do that, both with your peers, with your fellow students, with the faculty, and with the staff, to have these opportunities to really expand, to think, and to analyze critically.
I believe that a central part of my responsibility as a teacher and a central part of the responsibility of a university or a college with its students is to prepare our students to be effective, courageous citizens in the real world. To have the intellectual skills and the personality to be able to stand up for oneself, to defend one's positions, to explain why others are wrong, and not to cower or to be afraid or to be reluctant to engage in intellectual combat. I think our job is to make good citizens, and good citizens are people who are capable of having courage and defending their views. And I worry that the impetus for a lot of the censorship today is basically saying, I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to have to fight back. And that, I think, asks universities to do exactly what they're not supposed to do. On the other hand, I do think we have to be cognizant of the fact that we want universities to be places in which people are civil. That's a value that is important, not to the point of censorship, but as an aspiration. It's something universities should encourage. And I think we also have to be aware of the fact that it is tough to be a student in an environment in which all of your ideas are open to challenge and to question, and that universities have to be cognizant of the fact that they want to be able to make sure students can flourish in the institution. The idea is not to destroy students, it's to strengthen them. And therefore, I think we have to think about situations in which it may be that there is a really difficult situation created for students. Now, that does not ever, in my view, mean censorship, but it might mean support in a variety of ways. It may mean counseling in a variety of ways. I don't think we should simply blind ourselves to the fact that life is hard and not all of our students are capable of dealing with it equally. And therefore, it is important to be attentive to the fact that we need to nurture the kind of values in our students that we want them to have upon graduation.
So a question for our panelists. Melissa, one could argue that many times the value of free expression and the value of diversity and inclusion are in conflict. What do you think?
Sure. You know, I grew up, I was always told to be proud of my race. It's something that I am proud of, and it's a real source of strength. But I've also been the only black person in the room when we're discussing Huck Finn, or I've been the only woman of color in a meeting full of people who do not look like me. And it's stressful. And when you hear this conversation about freedom of expression and unpleasant views, that also sounds stressful. As a medical doctor, I know that that type of stress has health consequences. However, the principles of freedom of expression are incredibly important, and they only work if lots of people are present. So I'll quote one of my friends and colleagues who uses the terms bandwidth and interval training. And by bandwidth, it's like, you don't have to do this all of the time. You do what you're able to do at that time. Interval training, you do it, and then you take a rest. We have lots of centers, like the Center for Identity and Inclusion and other places. You find your networks and your colleagues in the places where you feel good. You restore, you build a muscle, and you get out and you have those arguments again. But you don't have to do this all the time. And we do understand that it can be stressful.
Thank you. Randy, do you have any other thoughts?
So I guess I want to focus on this idea. We've talked about the importance of free speech and free expression. No one said anything like free listening. but the other side of this is that in participating in this process, you have an obligation to listen to other people, and it really goes to this issue of diversity and inclusion. You are going to learn more talking to people, listening to people who see the world in a way that you don't, than talking to someone and listening to someone who thinks about the world exactly the way you do. You know how you think. You want to sit down with someone who's had a different set of experiences, who's got a different perspective on things, and you need to listen to them. So I don't think there's any conflict here at all. I think it's as the provost, Daniel Diermeyer, suggested, they go together completely. To have a context in which everyone thought about things the same, there'd be no point for us gathering together.
Thanks, Randy. And Michelle, are there any additional messages that students should take away about this notion of unplugging or disengaging periodically, as Melissa and Professor Stone alluded to?
I think they handled that question beautifully, and I would agree wholeheartedly. I think that just as we have on any given day, you know, a plethora of different events and speakers on campus, we also have a very, very wide array of places where students can just relax, kick back, hang out with people without having to constantly be engaged in intellectual battle, which we want you to do part of the time, but you don't have to do it all of the time. And you have agency as students, mapping your own course here to determine when you want to engage, and we hope you will, regularly, but you don't have to do it all of the time.
Great. Thank you. We're going to pivot just a bit. As we think about other ways that speech plays out on campus, we're going to move to another vignette. It's week 1 of the autumn quarter. That's next week. The first-year student, Jasper, who's an aspiring filmmaker, is putting up several vintage movie posters on his side of his residence hall room. One of the pictures is an image from the 1915 film, Birth of a Nation. which features white-hooded Klansmen. While Jasper's roommate is fine with the poster, other members of the community are not. Let's take a listen.
You know, every day when I leave this dorm, I walk past this room and I see a poster that's racist. I don't really think that that's something I should have to deal with, especially in my own home, and I'd really appreciate if you could talk to them and do something about it. If you don't, I'm gonna have to talk to the Maroon and write about this lack of action.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I hear you.
That was the head, wasn't it?
Hey Jasper, I just wanted to talk to you. Some students have come to me and had some problems with one of the posters in your room. They feel as if it creates a racially hostile environment. Do you see where they're coming from?
I suppose so, but it's my private room and I don't think they have a say in that. I've talked to my roommate and he's fine with the art I've decided to put up. Look, I like this house and I like the people here, but I don't want to compromise my artistic values just to keep the peace. You can't make me take it down.
You're right. I can't make you take down the poster, but I want you to think about the impact it'll have on the house community.
So, Michelle, here we have a poster in a private residence hall room. Does the university have a role in asking students to remove the poster?
No, but just as we saw in the vignette, just because you have a right to put something up in your room or say something doesn't mean that you're free from the potential consequences of how people around you are going to engage or react to that. And I think the conundrum here is that while Jasper could certainly keep his poster up, there's not going to be any university administrator who is going to force him to remove it. He may find that his ability to connect with many of his housemates is going to be compromised, and he's going to have to work through that in whatever way works for him. But to assume that people aren't going to necessarily be upset is probably folly on his part.
Great, thanks. And Ted, as you know, over the past year or so, we've had lots of posters on campus that folks have found offensive that are placed all over at large. What should students consider as a response to those posters?
Well, what I would suggest is not resorting to self-help in terms of addressing the poster itself. The university has fairly comprehensive policies regarding guidelines about where postings can take place, the content of postings that are appropriate, how they're attached, and so forth. And we really do follow these guidelines. So regardless of how offensive or upset a particular poster or posting may make you feel, I'd encourage you to not resort to self-help like tearing it down or defacing it or covering it. Contact campus and student life representatives, contact the dean on call. They will intervene, they will assess the situation, and if appropriate, as we have in the past, we'll remove the posting if it's not compliant with the policy. And by all means, take a picture of the posting and use it to catalyze conversation, debate, and discussion among your peers.
Great, thank you. We want to listen one more time to President Zimmer as he outlines the last two Chicago principles. So, Michelle, again, how does the university define disruptive conduct in this particular context?
So disruptive conduct is conduct that essentially prevents others from experiencing an event, whether it be a speaker or even a planned activity on campus. And so some specific examples that might come to mind are if a speaker is at a podium in a room like this, and individuals, whether it be one or many, shout down that speaker in such a way that it becomes impossible to hear the speaker. It might involve holding up signs or other large visual displays that in such a way that block the visual path of others so they can't see the speaker. It might involve things that make it impossible or dangerous for people to safely enter or exit a venue where an event or a speaker is taking place. So it's essentially acts that go beyond protesting an event, which you can do in a number of ways that don't actually interfere with other people being able to experience that event.
Great. Thank you. We're going to have our final vignette. During a history course, a professor shows the Nazi propaganda film, Triumph of the Will. After the conclusion of the film, the professor begins to highlight the important academic points within the film. Let's see what's happening.
So like we talked about last week in this film, you can see many examples of religious imagery, religious symbolism, nationalism, and pleas to the German people. Actually, lots of people have compared the rhetoric and style of Adolf Hitler to Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign. And
how dare you? How dare you insult President Trump like that? How can you compare a billionaire entrepreneur to a fascist dictator who murdered millions of people? In fact, if you want to start making comparisons, I think there's a lot of similarities between Hillary Clinton and Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, how dare you use the death of my grandparents and my relatives to push your political agenda?
Yeah, I think you both make great points, and if we discuss the topics more, you see...
We're not going to discuss this. You're standing on the graves of millions of people, each of whom had a family. You're a bully.
Yeah, you really need to apologize for your actions. If you don't, I'm going to talk to Fox News, Sean Hannity, The Maroon, and anyone else that will listen.
Yeah, I understand your anger, and it makes a lot of sense to me, but if we can discuss some of the academic points about the movie, I think that you'll see...
No, you can't silence us or push us around. We're going to make America great again.
Yeah, I think you've both become disruptive in this conversation. It isn't really happening. If you guys really want to talk about the academic points, you can come to my office hours. The times are posted on my door, but you need to leave.
Professor Stone is careful to point out that free speech works differently in the classroom because of the professor's ability to conduct the class in the exercise of academic freedom. Let's listen to what Professor Stone has to say.
Well, first of all, professors shouldn't be uncivil or disrespectful to their students. But at the same time, the real world will not protect people from that type of upset. And therefore, I think we do a grave disservice to our students by creating a safe space of a university that shields them from ugliness and from discord and from insult when it exists in the world. Again, my view is the point of education is to prepare students to be effective citizens. Effective citizens cannot be thin-skinned. And that doesn't mean I think faculty should be abusive to students for the sake of it, but I also think that this is part of the reality of life. And one might imagine a Peter Pan world in which there is no reality, but that's not our world. And I want my students to be able to go into that world and to be fearless and to be able to take challenge and insult. They shouldn't, ideally, in the ideal world, they shouldn't, but that's the world in which we live, and I don't want our students to be shielded from things that they have to learn how to deal with.
So we'll turn to our faculty members again. Randy and Melissa, it appears that in this scenario, the professor was in the midst of pointing out a very clear relationship in the material to the subject when he was interrupted by the students. Randy, were the students out of line?
Well, I mean, part of what happens in the classroom is that there's so much material you could cover that you're constantly having to make decisions about what you should do in class and what you should do out of class. Classes at the law school start a week from today. I spent most of the last 3 days sort of reshaping my materials, seeing what's happened in the last 2 years since I taught the class. So part of my job is to figure out what we should talk about and what we shouldn't talk about. There's a way in which classroom's not an exercise in democracy. So I think professors are responsive. I tend to hang around after class in the halls for like 10 to 15 minutes to answer their questions. So I think there are lots of vehicles for expressing concerns about what's being done in class, but I think having those disputes in the middle of class tends not to work particularly well.
Melissa, do you have any thoughts on how you might respond in a situation like this and other ways for students to raise concerns?
Sure. So as Randy said, it is difficult if the class is being disruptive, then the other students can't hear the point. So you can ask the students to talk to you after class. You can try to make your point and be able to use the rest of the class time to speak. And then maybe in a separate situation where you can sit down and hear from the students, hear their perspective, then you can use that to go back into your classroom and think about another way that you might approach the material.
Michelle, do you have any other thoughts? Or are you good?
You know, you're going to be challenged outside the classroom here. You're going to be challenged inside the classroom. That's why it's the University of Chicago, and that's why you came here, not to just be spoon-fed things you already believe or know. And I think that you've got to think about the experience of your fellow classmates. And, you know, it's not as if the faculty here sort of have this attitude of it's my way or the highway. They want to engage rigorously with their students, but they offer the appropriate means to do so. And I think that taking advantage of office hours, taking advantage of the after-class, you know, hall room chats is the best way to do that, and probably is going to be more satisfying ultimately to everyone rather than just taking a stand while class is going on.
Great. Thank you so much. And as we think about this really complex issue of free expression, let's hear one more time from that former law professor from the University of Chicago. He reminds us that the best strategy is not to shut others out or shut them down, no matter how we disagree with them. And here's how he put it.
You know, there's been a trend around the country of trying to get colleges to disinvite speakers with a different point of view or disrupt a politician's rally. Don't do that. No matter how ridiculous or offensive you might find the things that come out of their mouths. Because as my grandmother used to tell me, every time a fool speaks, they are just advertising their own ignorance. Let them talk. Let them talk. If you don't, you just make them a victim. And then they can avoid accountability. That doesn't mean you shouldn't challenge them. Have the confidence to challenge them. Confidence in the rightness of your position. There will be times when you shouldn't compromise your core values, your integrity. And you will have the responsibility to speak up in the face of injustice. But listen, engage. If the other side has a point, learn from them. If they're wrong, rebut them, teach them, beat them on the battlefield of ideas.
So as we conclude today's program, stay seated, we have lots of announcements. We hope that you will want to engage in learning more about this important value at the University of Chicago, its history at the university, and that you will visit this website that's on this slide. Before we dismiss, I want to hear one last time from Professor Stone about his perspective on this great place. I would encourage you to listen and reflect upon your own excitement about joining this community. After the video, we're going to ask our panelists for their final thoughts.
Particularly at Chicago, there is a kind of absolutely no-holds-barred community culture about questioning one another, being pretty fearless about questions and being pretty thick-skinned about being questioned. One of my favorite lines about the university is that at the University of Chicago, the only appropriate response to even the most withering question is not resentment, but gratitude. And I've always kept that in mind because I think that does capture very much what the intellectual give and take of the university is. And I just fell in love with that. I mean, to be in a place where everything was on the table.
Okay, I'd like to ask our panelists their final thoughts or words of advice to the class of 21, and then we've got a couple of announcements we need to make.
I have the sense that I may be the only graduate of the college on this panel. Is that right? Okay, so look, I came here just like you did many years ago, and I was a little nervous about the whole thing, I'll be honest. It seemed like a pretty intimidating place, very demanding place, and I wasn't sure that I was necessarily up for that. You've heard a lot of discussion today. From my perspective, it feels like we've all gone warm and fuzzy, but it can't feel that way to you. All this emphasis on being uncomfortable. This is a great four-year opportunity for you, so I just want to... I felt a sense of excitement in being here. I still feel that every day. When I had a chance to come back here as a professor, I couldn't have imagined that would be possible. And I really feel almost a sense of electricity when I step on the campus. I hope that's what you feel. You're surrounded by great, wonderful students and professors, people who have all sorts of interesting ideas. And you get to sort of immerse yourself in that for 4 incredibly exciting years. I hope you enjoy absolutely every minute of it.
I did not go here undergraduate. I went to Yale and then Harvard, but.
Wow.
But Randy, like you, I will say this is the most exciting intellectual community that I have ever been a part of. And yeah. And when I tell people about the University of Chicago, I don't emphasize just the freedom of expression, but it is the fact that people will be genuinely interested in your ideas, that you can walk across campus and talk to anyone, and they will be excited to hear what you think and to look for opportunities to collaborate. This program has talked about expression, but I spend more time listening and working on my skills to hear people and understand what it is they're saying to me. That's one of the challenges when you're in an environment of 30,000 people who are as diverse as this group of people, but that's the richness and the opportunity. So welcome to the University of Chicago.
Well, I'm a bit of an outsider because I'm not an alum and I'm not part of the academy, but I'm more of a pragmatist. So my advice is twofold. One is learn how to introduce yourself to other people. You won't believe the number of doors that will open for you within your community and outside of your community, and some of them will last a lifetime. And the second point, which I want to play off something that Randy said earlier, is commit yourself to improving your listening skills. This is something that's not really taught. I didn't learn it at home. I didn't learn it at law school or in college. It's something I learned the hard way, frankly, over a long period of time. But you'll find that if you learn how to listen, you become a stronger thinker, you become a better citizen, you become a better friend, and you're actually more capable of exposing the flaws of the people who are advancing ideas that you disagree with. So I would commend you to do that, and I would also say welcome to the University of Chicago. This is a wonderful place.
I'm between you and lunch, so I'll be quick. I couldn't agree more with my fellow 3 panelists, and all I will say is if you ever get stuck or have a tough day or really having a hard time understanding a particular point of view or you're feeling very alone, just remember that in addition to your peers, who are going to be the most spectacular people you'll meet in your lives, there's also a whole group of faculty and staff and administrators at this university who want to see you thrive, who want to see you flourish, and our doors are always open. So don't be shy about coming to talk to us if you're having a rough time. We will help you. And welcome to the University of Chicago.
Okay, a couple quick things before you move to your lunch. I know that's there. First of all, I would like you to join me in thanking our panelists for their time this morning. I would also like you to help me thank Calvin, Chase, and Sabine, who happen to be your elected student government leaders, and for helping us out today in the program. I want to thank you all for being here this morning. We hope this has been helpful as you start your journey at the University of Chicago. Again, thank you. Welcome to Chicago, and enjoy your week.